Okay, so in the last tutorial I was telling you about the differences between the different Spring container, that is a BeanFactory and an application context, and what conclusion we came to is that BeanFactory is just the low level for most applications, and application context is the big brother of BeanFactory, which has BeanFactory features, and along with that it has some other features like reading property files, messages, and you can say the event handling, internationalization, and everything. So we'll just prefer the application context. Okay, so let's just do the same thing with an application context. So I'll just remove this. I'll create an application context container. You can see that this is also in Spring Framework interface. Class path XML application context and the config location. Here you can just say it. This interface is implemented, you can say this is interface implementation given by many classes. It's not that it comes different flavors of application context. The most commonly used is this, because application context is what? It's an interface, so it needs to be implemented by some class because its methods are abstract. So it has many classes which has implemented this interface. The most commonly used are class path XML application context, because this is the one which loads a context definition from an XML file which is located in your class path. So now this XML file, it will try to, it's no, not a factory but a context. Another concept is same. So this will load your all the beans from the XML file located in my class path. But if we see, we have in spring.xml not in the class path because classes are located over here. It's in the main application. So if you try, this is the only change you need to do if you are removing the BeanFactory and putting an application context container. But if you try to run it, you will get an error. Why? Because the XML is not located in the class path. It's showing file not found exception. So you can just move it to class path, move it to src. Done. So now let's just run it. Now it's not a file node, it's a bean creation exception defined in the class path field. Why it is being filled? Could not instantiate this. Okay, again the default constructor. You must have written a constructor over here also. Okay, for the time being, let's remove the constructor. So when I'm running it, I'm getting, okay, we can do it with the director also. What's the name? That is director. Let's try to get some other bean, because till now we are just getting a manager bean. So for the director, you just need to change the name over here, and what else you need to change? The it's a director class. You can get the director address also. So this is how the application context, we work with an application context. Apart from this, I'll just tell you in the Spring theory only, it has some extra features. Apart from this application context, we have the other classes which has implemented these interfaces. Classes implemented application, please ignore the spellings. we have file system, application context. We can see it over here. If you just press control space, let's see if it comes. No, it's not coming for the time being. Okay, we can just tell you about this. Let me just comment it for the time being so that I can show you what all it supports. The most commonly I'm telling you. See, it's a file system resource, file system XML application context. Other than that, we have a XML web application context also. See, XML web application context. This is generally used when we are working with a web application. So this load the context definitions from an XML file which is being present within a web application. This is generally used with them. For normal Java application, we use the class path only. Clear? This was just the another feature. Okay, now let's first, before moving to set constructor injection, let me tell you the basic flow of any Spring application, that how the beans flow flows in an application. Till now what we studied, that we have a bean container which is being created first. As you can see over here, this is a bean container, or you can say a Spring container, which is created first. After that, we just have the bean. This bean container will read the XML file, it will instantiate the beans, and then we will just call the get bean, and beans are instantiated, and then the beans are being used. But in between these bean container being set up and then beans being instantiated, there is a normal processes which will work in between this also. So how that works? So let me just tell you the beans life cycle. So first, what actually happened, I'll just tell you in a very simple language. We have a BeanFactory being set up. Fine. After what will happen, we'll call a BeanFactory post processor. So we have many BeanFactories post processors, and which can be called, this is nothing but a Java classes only. So this BeanFactory post processors can be called, and you can perform some initialization if you want to do before the beans are being instantiated. Just the container is being set up, it hasn't done the instantiation of beans by reading the XML file. Before that, if you want to perform some initialization code, we can do it using the BeanFactory post processor classes. Clear? And after that, bean definitions loaded in the factory. Bean definitions are being loaded. So Spring will just it will instantiate the beans, and the references and the bean properties and everything will be done. After that, we have a bean post processor. So bean post processor is called. After the bean is being instantiated, we have a bean post processor classes also. That before someone calls the bean by using getBean method and we want some bean post processor to be done, then we can do this also. So the bean has implemented a bean post processor interface, then this will call the post processor methods after the beans are being initialized, and then they will do their job. And then at this point, now bean is ready. After this, the bean is ready to be used by the application, and it will remain in the context until this application context is being destroyed. Clear? So bean definitions are loaded and bean post processor called. After that, bean is ready to be used by application. until it is being destroyed. In this coming tutorials, in this flow will become more clear when I'll be using these classes, BeanFactory post processor and Bean post processor. So you will become more clear with this. You will also see that there are some beans which has implemented the initializing bean interface, disposable bean interface. So they have their own methods which are being called again after initialization. Bean is ready to be used until destroyed. You can write it over here, until the application context is destroyed, or bean destroy method is called until context destroyed. And in this you can see that if there is a disposable bean interface being implemented, then we can call that destroy bean method also. You can write it over here just for your understanding, that you can have a destroy bean method. For that you have a disposable bean interface being implemented. So this is actually the flow, the BeanFactory being set up, and then the BeanFactory post processor is called. This is a one thing which we didn't see earlier. Then bean definition is again loaded in that XML file from the diagram I was telling, and then bean post processor is called. These two are different, BeanFactory post processor and bean post processor, and then the same flow. Okay. Also one more thing I want to tell you over here, if you remember that diagram which we studied, the BeanFactory post processor, it will not create the bean when you will say get bean. If you see over here, this is very important to understand before we move further. Here we are doing get bean, so you must be thinking that it will create the bean when the get bean is called. No, it's not like that. These beans are already created when the context or the factory is loaded. So first that factory is loaded, then those beans are created in that factory by reading the XML file, and then you can later point out to call the get bean method. So this is called the singleton scope of a bean. So this I'll just discuss about this also in the coming tutorials. Okay, so just you remember the one thing. Now let's just move to the constructor injection. So we'll just do it in the next tutorial.